Joining us, start off with Steve Gelbs.
David, now that Mendoza just mentioned the news about Sean Mania, what in your mind is a realistic expectation for him moving forward here?
Yeah, I don't think it slows us down too much. I think the goal right now is he's probably pitching in a rehab game a week from today, next Tuesday, next Wednesday. And if he's able to do that and that goes well, that would be the last one probably, and then we get him back. So this sets us back a couple days, but at least right now we don't anticipate this necessarily resetting anything.
Overall, you know as well as anyone, you're going to go through hot stretches and cold stretches. For you, though, when you look at this last week and a half, what has been the biggest difference versus the type of success you guys were having early on?
When you go through a stretch like this, at least in my experience, it's generally not one thing. We've got a really good team, and for a really good team to go through a stretch like this, it's generally a number of different areas of the team that aren't performing up to certainly what we did earlier in the year or up to our capabilities, and we've seen that. We've had our starters go shorter and at times less effectively than we had seen for long stretches of this year. Segments of our offense and lineup aren't producing at a rate that we had previously and also that we think we should be producing at. And then when we've had, in a couple instances, when we've had close games or leads in the second half of games, we haven't been able to hold them. And those were all things we were doing pretty well for a long stretch of this season. And when you take a little bit of a step back in each area of the game and you play good teams and you have some injuries, you run into a stretch like this. And now it's our job to keep moving forward and get out of this as quickly and as well as we can.
Anthony?
Will Mania need surgery after the season?
I think that's to be determined. Sometimes you can pitch with these loose bodies for your entire career, and sometimes they need to come out. So I don't know that we have a definitive determination on that yet.
I know you're not a doctor, but the cortisone, that's just to allow him to reduce the inflammation to a point where he's not really feeling it anymore. Is that?
That's correct. Yep.
Dan, on the left.
And this just happened with the elbow yesterday. He hadn't dealt with this before.
That's correct.
Obviously, there was a lot of talk about Alvarez going down. What went into that decision from your perspective, and what do you hope to accomplish by sending him down there?
Yeah, Alvy's a really talented player, and he got to the big leagues at such a young level, such a young age, performed at such a high level immediately that it's difficult to remember sometimes he is still young. He's at an age that good prospects, industry-leading prospects, are still in Double-A, and he's been playing in the big leagues for 2+ years. So this is not unusual, and I think getting him a little bit of a chance to reset, to work on both sides of the game, and we do think there are performance improvements that are needed on both sides of the game. Giving him an opportunity to do that in a less pressurized environment where he's not doing it in front of 45,000 people every night against really good pitching, catching pitchers with really good stuff. We thought this was the right time to do that, both for him and for the team as a whole.
Joel?
Has anything that's come up over the last 10 days, 2 weeks, you think something that is exposed for you that you will have to address in the next 5 weeks before the deadline?
Anytime you go through a stretch like this, it's added information. And so we're learning about our team. We saw a lot of really good things through the first 2+ months of the season, and now we're seeing the flip side of that. I still think we have a really good team. I think we're certainly much better than we've played over the last 10 days, 12 days. But anytime you go through a stretch, it forces you to evaluate the team, take it in as information, add that to what we already know, and help us plot forward. So does it expose any singular spot? I don't think so right now, but it does add to our information about our team, which at this time of year can be valuable.
Will?
Hey, David, on that, Carlos spoke yesterday about the bottom half of your batting order. How much are you going to prioritize getting help there before the deadline?
I don't know yet. We have some players who are getting healthy who I think will help there. I also think the players who have struggled in our lineup over the last month largely are better offensive players than we've seen so far, and they themselves have demonstrated that over periods of this season. Clearly this month, however you want to define it, our bottom half of our lineup has not produced in a way that's helping us score runs. And this is a team game, and so it's really tough to rely on 3 or 4, even 5 guys to carry the load every single night. And we know that to be a really good offensive team, we certainly have the potential and aspiration to be a really good offensive team. We need 1 through 9 contributing more nights than not.
Keith.
With all the things that make the pitching process what it is, whether it's catcher setups or sequencing, have you noticed at all that with everybody kind of struggling that maybe the league might be adjusting to what you're doing, or is the process still a good process?
I haven't noticed that. I think in certain cases we've had some injuries. In certain cases we may not have executed quite as well as we have previously. And in certain cases the ball hasn't bounced where we'd like it to bounce. And we probably had some situations earlier in the year, certainly for the first 2 months, where the ball was bouncing where we needed it to bounce. And now we've had some times where we've still made some pretty good pitches in leverage spots, and the ball's found grass.
Jake.
I know he's been scuffling a little bit recently, but Pete Alonso's put together a very impressive first half, and I think some of the under-the-hood peripheral numbers kind of back that up, especially from a batted ball perspective. Do you view him as a fundamentally different player this year, as that his improvement will sustain moving forward?
I think we're seeing Pete at his best, and the best version of Pete throughout his career has been a really, really good player, and that's what we're seeing. And I think you're right; it is sustained by not only the results but the process. We have a player whose swing decisions have improved. He's hitting the ball incredibly hard. He's barreling a lot, and that's really exciting for us. And so he has performed at this level previously in his career, and it's great to see him doing it again.
Peter.
What is your sense of what the market might look like as you get closer to the trade deadline? Do you think it'll be buy or sell, or just what's your sense of it? Your 5 weeks out?
It's still really tough to tell, and with our current playoff format, so many teams don't really decide how they're going to approach the deadline until mid-July. We've got the draft now, first half of July, so a lot of teams turn their focus to that. And then once you get past the draft, teams that are maybe on that bubble area in the middle of the pack really begin to make their decisions how they're going to approach the deadline. So right now I think it's very difficult to tell which teams are where, and we'll gain more information as we go.
Joel.
David, appreciating that nobody has grabbed it, do you think at some point you just have to say, this person is our third baseman who's going to get the bulk of the at-bats, and see if somebody could sustain something significant over a period of time?
I think performance dictates that, and I think that's one of the things that Mendy has done so well and continues to do so well, is we're not afraid of competition, and guys who step up play. And so what I expect will happen is that someone is going to step up, and that player is going to play more often than not.
Laura.
Just what have you made of Ronnie Mauricio's at-bats, and do you think, given the time that he missed, is it possible for him to develop in a sustainable way at the major league level right now?
I think we're asking a lot of Ronnie right now. I think we put him in the big leagues coming off of a year and a half of not really playing baseball after a relatively few number of plate appearances in the minor leagues. So I think we're asking a lot. I think he's a really talented player. And clearly there's development left in the game, but I also think it's important to recognize what he does really well. It's easy at the big leagues to talk about and observe where some of the flaws are, but Ronnie still hits the ball incredibly hard. He's a dynamic player. He can play multiple positions on the infield at a high level. These are all really, he's a switch hitter. These are all really exciting player attributes. And yes, he's probably expanded the zone a little bit more than we'd like. But even with that, we have seen qualities that I think are going to make him a really, really good Major League player.
Dave on the left.
Dave, when we ask you about things that you might need for help, how much of the incomplete grades kind of for Vientos, Alvarez, and even Winker, who's missed so much time with injury, kind of impacted that? Do you really need to see at least Vientos and Winker to come back and be impactful? Alvarez seems kind of up in the air at the moment.
I think that's a part of it. We're going to get more information in the coming weeks and month, especially as we get healthier, and how we perform then, and how we think those players are adjusting back to the big leagues will be a part of how we view our team as we get to the deadline.
Tony.
Why do you think, or is there a common thread between some of the struggles that your younger position players have had, whether that's Mauricio, Beatty for stretches, Alvarez? Why do you think that has kind of happened across the board with those guys? So
I think we've had periods where all of those guys have performed at pretty high levels. I mean, Alvy certainly, Vientos. We had a stretch this year where Beatty has performed at a high level, and this is not unique to our young position players. I think if we look around baseball, the jump from AAA to the big leagues for position players is one that often takes some significant time, and often players, even who have success maybe for those first 200, 300, 400 plate appearances, then have an adjustment period the second go-around or the third go-around. So the gap between, we talk about this all the time, the gap between AAA and big league pitching is real, and it takes some time to adjust to that.
Separately, what gives you optimism that Montas will be better up here than he was in the minors?
I think that the final rehab start, stuff-wise, was actually pretty good, and probably got a little fatigued as he got into the fifth. But we saw the stuff package for the first 3-4 innings of that game that we wanted to see, and we're excited to see him out there tonight.
Jerry on the right.
It's kind of follow up on Tony's question. For when it comes to over here,
Yep.
when it comes to younger players, how do you know when the sample size of Major League production is telling of what they can do long term, one way or the other?
I don't think there's a firm rule there. I think it's a combination of amount of experience at the big leagues, what that individual player is working on, the player's ability to adjust, willingness to adjust, the feedback our coaches are giving us. These are all individuals, and they go through growth and development at different paces, and so it's very difficult to put a specific number on that.
Dan on the left.
David, when we asked you about Soto a couple of weeks ago, you said it looked like he might be trying to do too much. What have you seen more recently as his production has increased?
He's been really good. I mean, he's been a really, really talented Major League hitter, the type of impact that he's had throughout his entire career. I think once you get a hit or two to fall or a home run or two to clear the fence, maybe that helps him exhale a little bit. But I think he's been really good. He's gotten some big hits for us, and I would expect it to continue.
Laura on the right.
Increasingly, we're seeing players either going to outside pitching labs or outside hitting labs in the offseason. I guess, what's your perspective on that? And how do you help a player differentiate between a lab that could be helpful to him or something that could actually be detrimental down the line?
I think largely this is very beneficial for our game and for players, and we do our best to partner with external hitting coaches, external pitching coaches, external facilities, so that we can get on the same page. If our players are taking their initiative to try to get better, that's something we want to encourage and do our best to facilitate that.
Joel on the left.
Two things, if possible. The first one is, are there benchmarks, not necessarily statistical, that you need to see from Alvarez down below to get back here?
There are certainly some goals, and yes, they're not statistical, and they're on both sides of the ball, and we want to see him get back to the level of player that we know he can be, and that's what he wants to do as well.
And the second thing is, you mentioned a couple of times today that you think you're a good team, that the last 10 days, 2 weeks isn't reflective. You had 2 months, and really even last year, to suggest that you are a good team. What makes you still feel that these 2 weeks are not indicative of who you are as a team?
I think I've been through some semblance of these 2 weeks in every year of my career with every team, including a lot that were really good teams. And so you go through this enough. It's not fun to go through. No one in there is having a good time these last 2 weeks. You wear this, but you also have the perspective and the history to understand that most teams, even really talented teams, have rough stretches over the course of the year, and it's our job to keep moving forward and get out of the stretch as productively as we can.
Andrew? No, Mike. Pardon me.
Over here, David. I was looking back for Andrew. Andrew's over here. Yeah.
Mike?
David, obviously, everybody always wants more bullpen depth, depth. How concerned are you, going through what you've gone through with your starters and the attrition in the bullpen, at the low? How concerned are you about the load that your top relievers have kind of had to bear here through this first half of the season?
I think one of the strange things about this stretch is, frankly, because we've been behind a lot of games and sometimes by multiple runs, this stretch has actually afforded us an ability to maybe take the foot off the accelerator with some of our leverage guys. And so we've asked a lot of our pen, but it has largely been players who are here, who are going back to AAA, who we're not necessarily always counting on in those really late and close games. So I actually think this stretch has allowed us to give some of those guys a blow, and that should help them.
Andrew?
With Clay Holmes, obviously now he's past any innings that he's thrown in his career. How do you kind of thread the needle between his workload, keeping him fresh over the entirety of the remainder of the season?
I think it's constant monitoring, and that's what we're doing. It's player feedback. It's ensuring that all the testing he's doing in the gym and training room is consistent. It's looking at the stuff that's coming out of his hand when he's pitching. It's all of that, and for the moment, we feel pretty good about where he is.
Do a couple more. One from Will on the left.
Hey, David, in particular, your offense has struggled against left-handed pitching this month. Granted, I know that there were a couple of really good lefties there. I don't think it's necessarily limited to those dudes as well, though. What have you made of that, and has that grown into a larger concern for you?
Not yet. I think I look at our right-handed hitters as players who historically and should hit left-handed pitching pretty well. But I think it's fair to say if that's something that continues, then it does become a concern and something that we're going to have to look at.
Lastly, Jake?
You mentioned for Alvarez improvement on both sides of the baseball. At least on the public data that's available, his framing numbers specifically have kind of taken a pretty notable step back year over year. I know you guys are definitely working with something more advanced than what's on the public side, but can you speak a little bit to what might be behind a year over year defensive framing decline for a younger player?
Yeah, I think for any player, when you struggle on one side of the ball, sometimes it can impact the other side of the ball. And I don't know if that is happening. But it would be natural if it would. Alvy's really competitive. He cares a lot. And sometimes that level of emotion, that competitive spirit, can be tough to corral. And so, look, there are things I think we can help him with on both sides of the ball, receiving among them, to get him back to the level that we're accustomed to seeing.
All right. David, thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
your time. If you guys stand by.